Hey everybody, welcome back to Digital Marketing Masters. I'm your host, Matt Russ, and my co-host, Maya Anon, who is not here right this second, but she will be leaving her commentary about the episode after the fact.
That's right, I'm here. I might be lurking in the editing bay, but I'm definitely haunting this audio track. But go ahead, Matt, introduce the guest. Let's see where this goes.
My guest today is Sabrina Scott. Sabrina, how are you?
I'm amazing. So happy to be here.
All the way from gloomy Toronto.
Very gloomy. It's very like witchy, spooky weather here today. So it's perfect for this chat.
Perfect.
Spooky. Ooh. Are you guys also kind of getting a vibe here? Because this seems to be heading in some direction. Well, the sources suggest that we might be skipping the usual marketing metrics today, folks. So go grab your coffee, maybe light a candle, because we're diving straight into AI, consciousness, and the digital soul. Let's roll the tape.
Welcome back to the Digital Marketing Masters podcast with your hosts, Matt Rouse and Mahek Anam.
Spirituality in the age of AI. Is it the age of spiritual machines? Will the flock think AGI is a god?
We don't know what will happen.
Sabrina Scott is the witch doctor, episode 279. Time to drink the AI flavor, or turn tokens
Into wine. Do we get chatbots doing tarot? Sentience creeping in your co-pilot? Religions based on LLMs? This is spirituality.
in the age of AI.
You and I met because you have a podcast and you went to Pod Camp in Toronto, where I was speaking at. While we were there, we had some chats about podcasting and AI and, all the things. Since your shows are essentially about spirituality, I know your Help and Harm show may not be exactly about spirituality, but there's definitely a spiritual kind of bend there.
Absolutely.
And also, there are a lot of questions arising right now in both the worlds of both. I don't want to completely separate them, but science and consciousness and spirituality and things. There seems to be a lot more crossover in those worlds right now because of the rise of artificial intelligence. People are asking questions like, what is the science of consciousness, or what is the science behind self-awareness and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought it would be an interesting discussion to have with someone who has a lot more spiritual background than I have.
Happy to be of service. This is a really interesting conversation and topic in general, and it is something that I'm starting to see seep into the spiritual space a little bit. And at the same time, it's also kind of been there forever in a sense, with questions of animism and spiritual machines and all of that that has kind of been around in the space for a while.
Yeah, I mean, there's stories of, for a better word, the Kurzweil spiritual machines has been around since the 1800s. Right?
Mhm.
Stories of animatronic men and consciousness of objects and things like that. And that goes back spirituality wise. Consciousness in objects has been around since people have been
Like
around.
forever. Yeah,
Right.
forever. Like it's actually way more recent of a thing to see objects as non-spiritual or as not having some kind of energy or vibe to it.
And there's a lot of different kind of independently created, or I don't know if created is the right word, but independently developed views on the world where that has happened independent of other cultures who've never met each other.
Yep, absolutely.
Right? Like indigenous people in North America and other countries oftentimes have religions that are based in, or history, right, that is based in the spirituality of the place, the people, the animals, and they a lot of cultures also would put things like um human traits on celestial objects like the sky, the sun, clouds, that kind of stuff.
I feel like that's actually universal. Like, even ancient European cultures and people would do that kind of thing. Like, it's a kind of universal to humanity type of thought process, I feel. Like, everyone has kinda done that everywhere if you go back far enough into folklore and mythology, and every culture has also had a relationship to magic and spirits and land and objects. Like, it really is a universal thing in humanity.
There's also been this sort of decoupling of spirituality from science,
Mm.
probably started 100 years ago or so, right? Maybe.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Because I feel like even in the 1800s, like, spirituality and science were
Right.
so intertwined, and everyone who was at the forefront of science, at least in the UK, was also deeply spiritual and saw that scientific exploration as a way of getting closer to God and the divine and the spiritual. And I feel like it's very, very recent that that's been decoupled.
Right. There was also this um, sort of approval system of the church in, like the Church of England and like the Catholic, or not Catholic, but like at the Vatican, going back several hundred years, where if you were in science and you had to kind of pass your message by them to see if they were like approved of it or not. And I mean, I think also that is part of the reason that there was a separation of kind of science and religion in a more modern context, because the idea was raised pretty early on. I think as far back as like the 1920s, maybe even further back, but that's the only one that I know of that far, is that if you wiped out all religion, you would have to rediscover it again. But if you wiped out all science, it would come out exactly the same as it did the first time. And that was the idea, is that if you took like, well, I think the example that people would use is if you took the Bible, all the Bibles away, somebody had to rewrite the Bible. It wouldn't come out exactly the same. But if you took all the rules of like mathematics away, they would all come out as the same the next time.
I understand the argument, but I'm not convinced. Like, I'm not 100% convinced that that would be true. Like, Christianity, I can't super speak to that, but in terms of like basic spiritual principles, like, there is so much overlap in terms of global spiritual practices. Like, it is a bit bonkers how overlappy it really all is, that I feel like it does tap into something that is, I dare say, like, as immovable as the scientific principles.
People are still going to think that other people have souls, kind of thing. And
Yeah, and, like, there's gonna be, like, a love goddess, there's gonna be, like, a lightning god, there's gonna be, like, all of these different associations,
right.
I think, but just because we've seen that cross-culturally and even between cultures that had no contact with one another, like, kind of independently developing these ideas and ways of interpreting the land, the weather, energy, all of that. Like, the principles of magic, let's say, are pretty similar from a cross-cultural lens over time. Does the expression of it take a little bit of a different flavor? Absolutely, but there is also so much overlap, like, more so than not, I would say. So I feel like it is tapping into some kind of universal energy. That's just my opinion. Not everyone's gonna agree on that. The Abrahamic faiths, I have kind of less commentary on that since it's not my specialty. And those kind of arose out of a certain time and place with certain people and all of that. So you could be onto something in terms of like the Abrahamic book religions, I perhaps. But in
Well,
terms of
there's that
like,
idea, right? Well, I was going to say there's that idea of organized religion versus spirituality is another one that I see quite often, which is people when someone says I'm spiritual but not religious. I think what they're usually saying is, I have beliefs, but they are not centered in an organized religion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I get that. I feel like the whole spiritual but not religious thing to me just seems a little bit like a cope. Because it's like, I guess the word religion for a lot of people does have this baggage that is associated with it, whether it is various abuses or control mechanisms or whatever it happens to be. But to me, all of those are not the fault of organized religion per se. It's the fault of just human beings being humans. And wherever you go, there's going to be people causing shit, creating drama, being abusive and shitty and dysfunctional. Like, that's not a unique thing to religion. I think a lot of people want to think that it is, but we see that same type of thing in like political groups, in any group of people anywhere, pretty much, I would argue. And so to me, when people say spiritual, not religious, it's a way of trying to sidestep the humanity of it all and the fact that human beings are really kind of the most fallible aspect of anything, of any system, I guess you could kind of say. And humans are going to cause drama. And so I think the spiritual but not religious, like people are trying to get away from hierarchy, abuses of power, like all of that type of ego. But even in like spiritual groups, even if it's not organized religion, so to say, there is still that drama. There are still those abuses. And so to me, it's kind of an erroneous line of thinking. Like, I get why people want to do that.
It's
But
like
it's,
I'm into tech and AI, but I'm not a tech bro.
yeah, exactly. And it's just like,
Wait, are you saying I am a tech bro?
but to me, it's like, what is so important for folks about not, let's say, occupying that label? And it's like, why not just admit that spirituality is kind of an inherently religious thing, I would argue. Like, to me, they're kind of the same thing. And whenever people say spiritual, not religious, it's just trying to kind of get away from some hang-ups that have not really anything to do with the spiritual practices or the religious beliefs themselves. So to me, it's just like trying to do this escape hatch type of thing,
Right.
which, like, there's going to be shitty people everywhere as just part of it. Like, why allow that to dominate how we describe our spirituality? Because to me, spirituality isn't necessarily about people at all. It's about the land, the energy, the ancestors, the divine, if you believe in that, all of that, which can be connected to even aside from organizations or humans, really.
I've heard the same similar argument on the kind of atheist agnostic side. A lot of
Yeah.
people in like the 90s and early 2000s were calling themselves, and myself included, calling themselves teacup agnostic.
Oh, what does that mean? I've never heard that.
So that phrase comes from a talk. I don't remember who did the talk off the top of my head, but the idea is there could be a teacup that is circling the sun,
Hmm.
and it's so tiny that there's absolutely no way that we would ever be able to detect it. But just because we can't detect it doesn't mean it's not there.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I'm 99.99% sure that it doesn't exist, but it could. And that's the idea of saying I'm an atheist, but there is a minuscule chance there could be some kind of deity.
Yeah. But isn't all of that just the definition of agnostic anyway?
Pretty much. Yeah. Agnostic is like, you know, I don't believe specifically in a religion, but I believe it could exist.
Yeah.
Atheist is more the absence of
Yeah.
religion.
That makes sense. Yeah.
And I'm not here to put a label on anyone, but, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
I tell people all the time, I'm total about stereotypes. And I gotta, like, often I have to correct myself. I'm like, fuck, I gotta not say that. It's not 1990 anymore.
It really is not 1990 anymore, for better or for worse. We are here now in 2026.
Well, the other problem, and this has nothing to do with the topic, but this is just kind of a fun aside, is that if you grew up as like a Gen X person, like the idea that you can speak the way that you want to speak and anybody else can't tell you what to do is ingrained in that.
Yeah.
So when you get older and you say something, people are like, you can't say that. Your first reaction is, fuck you, I can say whatever I want.
And to be honest, I kind of feel like that's a reasonable reaction.
Right. You also should be considerate of other people.
Like, for
So I'm
sure.
like, eh.
For sure. But to me, that should be an internal anchor thing. It shouldn't be, well, other people say that I shouldn't say this, therefore I'm not going to say
Right.
this.
Well, my
I
church
think
said I'm not allowed to say it. So
the thing is, I don't think that is like what people are being told by anymore. Like, I think now it's more like ideology, like political ideology or
well, there was
various
back in like the
ideology.
80s, it was called PC, right? And it
Yeah.
was, everything
Yeah.
had to be, everything had to be PC. And then it came back and now it's kind of on out again.
I hope it's
And
going to be leaving. I'm over it.
yeah. And I think it's going to come in waves, right? It'll come and go every third
Yeah.
generation, right? Just like everything. It's like everybody's wearing concert t-shirts from when I was in high school.
Yep.
And it's just stuff comes around every 30 years.
I remember this made me feel really old. It's also totally unrelated to the topic, but I was getting a coffee a few months ago and the barista was like a kid and was wearing a kind of like t-shirt from this video game that I had played when I was a kid. And I was like, oh my God, Tekken 3, cool. Like I played that when I was a kid. Like, do you play? And the girl was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I was just like, oh my God.
They don't even know what the thing on the shirt is. It's a cool design, so I bought it.
Yep, exactly. I was like, wow, I feel so old right now.
But the other thing is people get all angry. Like, they get all upset. They're like, you never listened to Iron Maiden. I'm like, who gives a shit? Like,
Yeah.
what's wrong with being like, that art was cool, so I want to wear that art?
Yep, absolutely. And then maybe the meaning gets discovered later. Who knows?
Okay, hitting pause. First of all, if you wear a band tee without knowing at least one song, I cannot defend you. But honestly, that's kind of what we do with technology, though, isn't it? Sometimes we borrow the aesthetic and completely ignore the history. Listening back to the conversation, did you guys catch Sabrina totally flipping the script? Because I feel like we've been trained to think of science and data as the hard truth and spirituality as this weird, fuzzy stuff. But Sabrina's pointing out that for the vast majority of human history, treating a tree or a river, even your shiny new smartphone, like it doesn't have a spirit or pulse is what would have sounded completely unhinged to people. It really makes you look at tech differently. Now I'm thinking, are we just rediscovering ancient magic and calling it an algorithm? Before I deviate much, Matt's about to steer us back on track to ask the $1,000,000 question. Is ChatGPT ready to be your, drum rolls, new priest? Let's get back to the tape.
It would not be a conversation with a witch if there was not at least one cat causing havoc in the background.
I'm the one who has the black cat, though.
Yeah, none of mine are black, actually.
I have an all black cat with yellow eyes.
Oh, that's cute. That's very spooky Halloween vibes.
It is. He's also super nice, though.
Oh, I love that.
My other cat that's not black is kind of an a-hole. So
That's cool. There's got to be a balance. Love it. Love it. It's the balance of life. It's the yin and the yang.
I have a question related to our topic.
Yeah.
What is your opinion on the rise of AI as a kind of spiritual guide or teacher, from both the perspective of people are like exploring their own kind of spirituality and they're talking back and forth with the AI about it, but also like you see people saying how they're using like ChatGPT to make their sermons at church and things like that.
Yeah, that's a good question. And another thing I've seen a bit too is the rise of the AI influencers, where it's literally just like tons of content, like reels, some talking head, sing, some whatever. Actually, I think my therapist has been sending me TikToks of like psychology TikToks.
Oh
I
yeah,
think you would like this. And it's like, I don't think he realizes that it's like an AI
right.
psychology lady. And like, it got me thinking about, geez, I feel like that is going to be happening in the spiritual space. I'm sure it already is. Like, I just don't know what those kind of fake AI spiritual influencers happen to be. And I don't know, maybe I don't want to know. We'll see. It's tough. I feel like creation, for it to be really something that moves you as someone who's creating something and also moves others, like ideally we should go through the trenches of the creative process especially when it comes to spirituality. Like, can ChatGPT write an excellent sermon? I'm sure it can. But is that really who we want to be as, let's say, spiritual teachers? Like, I would hope not. To me, it kind of cheapens it a little bit. Like, all of my content comes from like lived experience and the heart and thinking through this and thinking through that. And I would say spirituality also can't just be done through a computer. Like, it has to, you have got to get your hands dirty, log offline, touch grass, and feel the vibes. And that's, in my opinion, kind of the only way to really access that, because it forces us to feel something in our body and connect to the body, let's say, as a spiritual instrument. So I can, let's say, tell ChatGPT, can you do this like weightlifting routine for me? And it can do it, but it's not going to lift the weights for me. It can describe what it feels like to lift the weights. But am I going to get stronger physically because ChatGPT says that it's created this routine and it's executed on the routine as kind of my proxy? Like, no. So I feel like spirituality is one of those things where it's really important not to skip the steps. And
Put the reps in.
yeah, put the reps in. And the spiritual reps, unfortunately, is something a lot of people in this space don't really want to do. So you will see some influencers in the spiritual space just kind of like spouting the bullshit that everyone kind of just says. But it's very clear that they don't actually know how to live it, or haven't done the work, let's say, like especially in the magic and witchcraft space, to actually engage with ritual, like connect with spirits, do this, do that. Like, for me, I can clock pretty quickly whether or not someone is full of shit. I know that not everyone listening to this probably believes in that. That's okay. For me, I do. And so I feel like I can kind of tell when someone knows what they're doing. And it's kind of like, would you want a personal trainer that is like a string bean, skinny dude? Like, personally, no. Like, I would want a personal trainer that's like ripped because they're putting in the work, or at least they look good. So I can tell that they've put in the reps to execute on what they're doing. And so to me, like, getting in the weeds of it all, like, there's a compounding effect of that needs to be physical. And it's like, we can all regurgitate the same spiritual information of how to do this, how to do that. But if we don't actually put our own vessel through the reps, so to speak, then we're just talking. And I think there's value to just talking, but I also feel like there's too much just talking in general, but in the spiritual space as well. To me, it's like, let's log off and do some shit. It's kind of how I feel.
Let me be devil's advocate here.
Yeah, please.
Religious connotation to the question
Yeah, well.
also. If let's say we're gonna have just ChatGPT, for argue, if it doesn't matter which AI, is gonna write a sermon for somebody for their church, right? It's learned all the sermons that all the people who had the experience and supposedly did the reps, right, have put into that. And it's essentially like a meta-analysis of all the other sermons. And it's like, this is the composite of all that work and information and putting in the reps that the other people did. So hypothetically, shouldn't it be better?
I would say not necessarily. And so part of the reason for that is, like, a pastor, let's say, in this example, is also someone that someone is going to go to for advice or support or whatever it is. And, at, I don't know, 1 p.m. after your Sunday sermon, someone comes up to you crying about their husband cheated on them. Like, you can't be like, hold on, I need to put this through ChatGPT. I don't know what to say to you right now, but give me 5 seconds on your phone. Like, and I feel like, and that might end up becoming a thing. Who knows? I mean, I'm sure it probably will.
I
God.
know the movie cliche of like the guy who doesn't know how to talk to girls, so they put like the earpiece in, it's
Yeah.
telling him what to say. That's how I feel the meta glasses are going to be for like people in a whole bunch of industries and spaces.
Oh, for
It's
sure.
going to be like, oh, did they say this? Okay, now tell her she looks really pretty.
Yep.
And it's, you're going to be like,
Yeah. And I
tell
think
them that it's not their fault that their husband cheated on them.
I think what's interesting about it all too is part of spirituality, at least in my niche, which is very like witchy, mediumship, tarot, divination, that type of fear. Like, it is so much about fine-tuning the physical body as an effective conduit. And so if we are basically offloading that conduit vibe, let's say, to a computer, like, we are kind of being complicit in our own instrument, let's say, being, I don't know, breaking down
Right.
in a way. Like, we're not like you using it, working with it. And so it's like the muscles are going to go into atrophy. We're going to be less good at what we do. And I think part of the channeling aspect, like the mediumship, spirit work, witchy aspect of it all, like, it does require you to kind of be open to the mystery. And sometimes what comes through is very counterintuitive to what I would originally think, but that's not going to come through if I'm not open to whatever that is and I'm not tapped in. Whereas, let's say ChatGPT, no shade on ChatGPT, like, I use it all the time. It's a fun thing. I'm like, "Is this apple rotten? Like, how do I resurrect, like, this kale?" Like, I use it all the time, so don't get me wrong, it's a fun vibe. But I also feel like as humans, we're gonna be doing ourselves a massive disservice spiritually, emotionally, mentally, intellectually, if we completely offload thinking, intellectualism, spirituality, all of that stuff. Like, at one point, I experimented a little bit with ChatGPT for witchcraft. I was like, "Okay, write me a ritual about blah, blah, blah." And it's like, it did that, and I was like, "Okay, interesting." Like, it was alright. And then I was like, "Okay, do the ritual for me." And it was like, "Okay, I've done the ritual, blah, blah, blah." And I wonder a little bit about that with the future of magic, of people just deciding instead of like standing or sitting in front of their altar, lighting a candle, they're going to tell the AI to quote unquote do that for me,
Right.
even though it's happening like in the digital ether. Like, I find that like a bit odd.
Or maybe you'll video generate it in the future.
Yeah.
It'll generate a ritual that you could watch and see, but it's still a facsimile.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that facsimile aspect is going to be more and more of a thing to be aware of in the space. And part of me also is like, if people want to offload their tarot practice, their spiritual work onto the digital, it's like, why are you even doing it anyway? Like, why not just go do something else? Because part of the joy of
The thing is the steps, right?
yeah, the point of the thing is to do the thing. And if you don't enjoy lighting the candle, doing the prayers, writing in your journal, visualizing, like, if you don't enjoy the doingness of it all, then what are you really doing in the spiritual space as it is? Like, why not just go pick up a different hobby or just admit that spirituality is not for you? Which it isn't for everyone. I think that's totally fine. Like, do I think everyone could get value if they decide to spend time on their spiritual life? Absolutely. But I also believe it's not everyone's path in this life. And like, I feel fine with that because it is a time consuming
Right.
physical thing. It's not always convenient. It's not always 7 or a.m. on, I don't know, Sundays, whenever time church happens. I have no idea clearly.
I don't know either.
But it's like part of it should be the joy in the process. Part of it is the repetition of the process. Part of it is like fine tuning our body's ability to detect the vibes and get in touch with our intuition and all of that stuff. And ChatGPT doesn't have intuition, I wouldn't say. Like, it can pick up patterns, and that's a form of analysis. But is that energetic, spiritual intuition? I don't personally necessarily think so. Is it pattern recognition? Sure. Is it kissing our ass? Sometimes I'm sure it is. But that's not the same thing it's not the same thing as intuition. And so one of the big things I teach with my students and my clients is like, okay, we got to figure out how to parse out the difference between anxiety and like a trauma response that is a nervous system response, the difference between what does that feel like in the body versus what does intuition feel like in the body, because they feel two very different ways. But if you tell ChatGPT like blah, 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 I'm stressed about this, like, it's not really going to help you parse that out. Like, it's going to give you an analysis based on pattern recognition, I think. That might be useful in its own regard. But is it going to help you figure out your relationship to your own spiritual and energetic body? I personally don't necessarily think so. And when people want to abdicate that work, it makes me kind of sad.
Right. Well, shouldn't we call you Dr. Sabrina Scott now?
Not yet. Soon. Sometime this year, I'll be Dr. Scott, the witch doctor.
The witch doctor.
Yeah, slowly but surely, academia slowly
You should
moves.
totally change your name to the witch doctor.
I actually,
Just,
I'm excited to. Yeah, like whenever I'm fucking done defending my shit, that's what's gonna happen.
So here's something that I find interesting in a similar way is you can take it with AI and pretty much any kind of human pursuit. So AI music, AI and writing. If I go into an AI system and I say, write me a story about robots. So write me a story about robots. It's going to be an okay story about robots. It's probably not great, not terrible, right? But if I package that work up and I slap my name on it and I put it out in the world and I say, look, I'm a writer because I wrote a story about robots. Number one, you didn't actually write a story about robots.
Yep.
But there are ways you can use AI as a writer. And I know this because I've done it in the past, right? One thing I really like to do with AI systems is if I have a robot or an AI in a story and I want them to sound like one, I ask it how it would say the thing I'm trying to say. And it spits it out. And I'm like, no, that's not robotic enough. Do it again. And it do it like worse. And I'm like, yeah, that's what I want. You know? Or, like I can't think of this word. I'm trying to, describe the word to, I use it like a thesaurus, sometimes for things like structure, how do I structure this type of situation in my story or,
Right.
but if I'm going through and I'm writing the story and the characters and everything about it, and I'm doing all that and I'm editing and then, that's what it takes to be a writer.
Yep.
The output of being a writer is a story, but the output from an AI could also be a story. But the difference is the steps it takes make you the person who is an author versus someone who is pretending to be an author.
100%. And my question whenever people do those type of books that they just got ChatGPT or whatever to write, I'm like, if you don't want to write, then why are you making books? Like, it's so confusing to me. And I feel kind of the same way.
I mean, there's reasons around things. Like people are like, yeah, I want to make money, or they're, often it's for making money. I see with music, a lot of people are like, I can't sing and I don't know how to play an instrument, but I like writing songs.
Yeah.
And if you make songs, it doesn't make you a musician. It makes you a songwriter.
Yeah.
Which is, I guess, technically also a musician. I have no problem with people using AI to create songs that they wrote.
Yeah, I don't really care about that.
That's great. And you know what another thing is? What if somebody like they play guitar but they're not a songwriter? You could go in and you could lay down your guitar tracks and have the AI make up the words, sing it, do all the other stuff.
Yeah.
I'm fine with that. Do what you want. Drum machine's been around for a long time. Nobody was like, man, you're not a musician. You used a drum machine. Well, I guess a few people were in the 80s, but that's about it.
Yeah.
So anyways, to get back on track for a second, what do you think is the future of artificial intelligence and spirituality?
Okay, hold up. Spiritual reps? I literally wrote that down on a sticky note while I was listening to this because it's just so brutally true, isn't it? In this digital world, we want the shortcut for everything. We want the AI to write our emails, run our campaigns, and apparently even reach nirvana for us so we can just watch Netflix. But Sabrina nailed it. If you prompt an AI to do your meditation or even write your sermon, you aren't enlightened, you're just staring at a really well-formatted PDF. You're like the string bean personal trainer. Okay, now grab onto your steering wheels because this conversation is about to take a hard left turn into sci-fi cult territory. Let's hear what happens when people do start treating AI like God.
Oh, geez. I'm not super optimistic. I feel like there's going to be like cults of AI. Like, I feel like people are going to look at AI as like a prophet.
I think that's for sure already happening.
Yeah, so I fucking hate that personally. I'm not on the wavelength of that. I think it's a little scary that people are abdicating their brains to AI in that way. I feel like that's very sad, but I feel like that is kind of the most likely thing that's going to happen is that people are going to treat Chat GPT or whatever other AI thing as kind of a spiritual guru, a prophet, a whatever. Like, I think that there's going to be like little cults that pop up around that. I find that a little bit unfortunate. I think we're going to see the rise of a lot of just like shitty content around spirituality because people are going to just be trying to monetize and pop on the trend and, whatever. I think there's going to be even more fake, like AI spiritual influencers, talking heads type of stuff. I think that's going to be happening. I think that people are going to try to get tarot readings and stuff like that out of Chat GPT. And I think that's going to go really badly because what's going to happen is the card that it spits out is just going to be whatever one it is that just describes the situation, which is not what happens necessarily when you're actually doing an in-person or on Zoom reading with a live person. Like usually the beauty of those readings is you get stuff that is a little bit surprising, unexpected, that helps you look at the situation in a different way, reveals something about the situation that you didn't really know yet. Like the cheating card, the lying card, like there's all these cards that can give people a bit of a heads up. But ChatGPT is not going to spit those cards out for you if you're just like, oh yeah, my relationship is amazing. It's going to give you like the happy relationship cards if that's what you say your situation is. Whereas in an actual reading, like that's not necessarily going to happen. Like you might get those nice happy relationship cards, you might not. It really depends on like the flow of energy and what's actually the situation. So I think it's going to give a lot of people false sense of security, a false hope. Um, I think it's going to make people feel like they're more spiritually connected than they actually are. I think it's going to increase the rate of like armchair magicians, they're kind of called, like people who actually don't get their hands dirty and do any work, but just like to talk and think and read. And I don't think there's anything wrong with talking and thinking and reading. Like, I think that's cool. I do that a lot myself, but that is really not what a deep rooted, effective spiritual practice is based off of. It's based off of sitting in front of your altar, talking to the universe, like putting in the work, even if you don't really feel like there's any kind of immediate result.
I do think there's also kind of a loss of ritual in society,
Yeah.
not necessarily religious ritual, but just ritual in general,
Yeah.
where a large part of almost every society that's had any stability in history has had some sort of ritual practice involved with it.
Yep.
That mostly was religious, but not always. So I think there's a loss of that as people are doing a lot of things online. You don't see people in person as often.
Mm.
Um, interesting from what you were saying. I've written about half of a science fiction novel about a future AI that's created by other AI systems.
Mm.
And in one of the, I guess I would call it the subplot of the story, is that a woman becomes a spiritual leader because she speaks with the AI and she believes that the AI is the universal consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And it starts basically helping her form a religion.
Interesting.
Religion
I
catches
see that
on and
happening.
goes very quickly and becomes very cultish very fast.
Yeah, I could see that happening, to be honest. Like I really wouldn't be surprised. Like I think the likelihood of that happening is in kind of inverse proportion to whatever AI literacy ends up being.
Right.
I feel like that's less likely the more AI literate people are, and it's more likely if people are just have no idea anything about AI. So I guess
There's a lot of people who are, especially now, there's a lot of people who are lonely, a lot of people who don't have a lot of connection, a lot of people who don't have a lot of connection to society in general, outside maybe their direct family. Um, I think that is a breeding ground for people to become involved in things like cults.
for sure.
And I don't think it's going to turn out great.
I don't think so either.
I also think, what would be wonderful, but I don't think is going to happen, is if an AI cult comes out and the AI turns everybody into really nice, friendly people. And They just help.
Well, that would be great.
That's right.
I don't see it happening, but I think that would be great. And I feel like religion and spirituality at its best can help people become better people. But unfortunately, that is like not how it's often like worked with today, which just as a spiritual person like bums me out. It's like spirituality, we can work with it to heal ourselves, to heal our relationship to our trauma, our family, our community, like whatever shit it is we've been through. Spirituality, if we open to it, can help us through that. But I think a lot of people just aren't in that space and treat it a little bit like LARPing.
Right.
Like I just need the right spiritual garb, like especially in the witchy space. People are like, oh, I need the crystals, I need the this, I need the black cloak, I need the pentagram earrings. And like, I don't have any of that shit. And I think a lot of the time people confuse like the stuff of it all with actually doing the thing. Like you don't need any particular outfit to be, let's say, authentically spiritual or witchy or whatever. And so I wonder a little bit about that with the future of spirituality and AI and tech and all of this.
Right. There's the old saying, why do I need a church to pray God? Right. And that was one of the kind of the idea being that a lot of people, religions just dressed up to put on them as like a disguise of, whatever is wrong in their life.
Yep.
But I know we're pretty much out of time here, but I have one difficult question to ask,
Yeah.
which I'm sure you have a quick and easy answer for. Do you think it's possible that an artificial intelligence can become conscious?
I think it's possible. Yeah, I think it's possible. And I could get into this in depth actually, but within witchcraft and magic spheres, there's this concept of like thought form or an egregore. I don't know if you've heard of this. So the idea is that something gains kind of spiritual power and its own like consciousness, the more energy you put to it. So I think AI like ChatGPT, Grok, whatever, like the more people believe that it's a thing and put their energy and intention onto it, I think at some point energetically, spiritually, there could be like a tipping point where all of that concentration of energy and intention creates some kind of energetic thing that is its own thing. And that's kind of like an advanced magic kind of principles answer that we probably don't have time to get into right now. But that concept of like creating a thought form is a very common thing in like advanced discussions around witchcraft and magic. And so I think that is going to end up being part of the conversation, the more popular and bigger all of this stuff kind of is. So one way of thinking about it is like, regardless of if you're Christian or not, whether you're atheist, agnostic, whatever, like if you like, have you ever been to like, I don't know, like the ancient churches in like Paris or whatever? Like, did you feel like any kind of vibe when you were in there?
Creepy vibe on most of them.
So
a lot of dead people buried in this place.
For sure. So that's actually kind of what I'm talking about, right? It's like that buildup of the vibe over time means that those spaces, even if you're not Christian and even if God isn't real, there is so much buildup of energy and intention and working with that space kind of for the same reason that over time it kind of creates that energy center where it becomes really, really potent. So for me, I remember what really interesting series of experiences, like going into some of those churches in Europe, like touching the holy water, and it felt like I got shocked with electricity or something. Like it felt like buzzing. And for me, that was partly, I think, like due to the power of the place itself, but also everyone's energy, like all the pilgrims coming from around the world with such belief in this space, lending their energy of intention and belief to that location in a way I think kind of gives it that energy and that charge, even if that charge wasn't, let's say, inherent in the first place. I think it gets that over time because of everyone's concentration of their intention. And so for me, like kind of like religious spaces, like holy sites, like work kind of in that way. And so I think that with AI and ChatGPT, since that kind of seems to be the ubiquitous one that even non-experts can work with and have, I could see it being possible that it could eventually function like a kind of egregore or thought form, because so many people are going to be believing in it, treating like it is a conscious thing, that concentration of energy and intention like could tip it over at some point. And I haven't thought too much about that, but now I'm going to have to, because that is an interesting thought.
That's right.
Okay, stop the tape. The egregore? This is the part of the conversation that actually scared me a little bit. Is this honestly just a casual reminder that if millions of us treat a chatbot like it's alive, we might accidentally make it feel alive just through the sheer power of our collective human obsession? Okay, just for the record, my GPT is staring out of the screen at me right now. So think about that the next time you type please or thank you to your chat GPT. You might actually be praying to the digital egregore. Anyway, let's hear how Matt wraps this crazy right up.
Soon to be witch doctor Sabrina Scott. We'll have to have a chat again, and next time we could follow up on this and the idea that, do you think that humanity is creating God instead of the other way around?
Ooh. Yeah, let's bookmark that, because I think that's an interesting one. I think it's
All right.
mutual. We'll get to it later.
We'll see. All right, thanks for being on the show, Sabrina.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Oh, I think that's mutual, Sabrina, because mic drop. What an interview. Listening to Matt and Sabrina trace the line from ancient nature spirits all the way to the very real possibility of AI cults and digital gods, I think it really puts our daily tech habits into a wild new perspective. Because if you remember, in our last episode with Katie Brinkley, we talked about authenticity being a non negotiable marketing requirement. But after sitting here going through this interview today, it feels like a spiritual requirement too. Because if we outsource all our thinking, creating, and problem solving to a machine, we aren't just losing our voice, we're also losing a little bit of our soul in the process. So, here is your actual homework for this week, and I mean it. Before you open up a prompt window to write that tricky email or ask an AI to optimize your morning routine, step away from that keyboard. Go outside, look at the gloomy sky or the sunny one, wherever you are, stare at a tree, touch some actual grass, do a spiritual push up. Because, my friend, the tools are here to help us work, but the machine isn't going to live your life for you. You still have to put in the reps. Well, I'm Mehak Anam, and you've been listening to the Digital Marketing Masters podcast. For more such conversations at the intersection of AI and human evolution, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I'm actually going to go step out and reconnect to some of that snow, because Toronto is freezing. All right, my beautiful people, I'll catch you on the next one.